Today we're stepping into the quiet heart of the modern supply chain, a place most people never see, but every one of us depends on. A place where the movement of food, medicine, electronics, toys, and everyday goods is determined not by human hands, but by the cold logic of artificial intelligence and the precision of high-speed robots. This space is where Symbotic has built its empire. Welcome back to TechEyeSpy. If you are new here, I'm glad you've joined us. If you're returning, you already know the premise. We strip away the headlines, the hype, the market buzz, and we look at what a company actually is, its technology, its trajectory, and its truth. And Symbotic is a fascinating study in how a single idea, reimagine the warehouse, can turn into a multi-billion-dollar inflection point for an entire sector. You've probably seen the headlines about automation reshaping everything, labor shortages, rising costs, e-commerce pushing warehouses to breaking point. But what separates Symbotic from the usual robotics pitches is their attempt to automate the entire warehouse end to end. Not just conveyor belts or robotic arms, but the whole choreography from inbound pallets to outbound mixed SKU orders. That kind of ambition creates winners, losers, and big questions for investors. Before we get too deep, just a reminder that TechEyeSpy is more than this podcast. We also publish a full library of investment and technology books through Rhubarb Bridge Publishing, and those titles are available right now on Amazon and all good bookshops. If you want to go beyond the podcast and understand the wider forces transforming technology, finance, infrastructure, and the future of work, those books are the place to start. So settle in. Today we explore Symbotic, the system, the strategy, and the strange future where the robots in the warehouse know more about what we need than we do. Strengths. When you look closely at Symbotic, the first thing you notice is how unusually complete the system is. Most warehouse automation firms focus on one element: a robotic arm here, a conveyor system there, perhaps an AI scheduling engine sold as a subscription on top. Symbotic does not play that game. It goes for the whole warehouse, from the moment a pallet arrives at the loading dock to the final pallet that leaves on a truck. That unified approach is rare and incredibly powerful. At the center of it all is the fleet of autonomous mobile robots. They move with alarming speed and accuracy, navigating narrow aisles and high-density storage racks that no human forklift could hope to enter. Speed, accuracy, and density are the three pillars. The robots reach up to 20 miles per hour inside that controlled environment. And yet the error rate is so small, it is quoted at 6 nines of accuracy. That level of precision translates directly into fewer stockouts, fewer returns, and a smoother supply chain for the retailers who depend on it. The modular design is another major strength. Symbotic systems can be fitted into existing warehouse footprints without forcing a retailer to rebuild the entire space. The racks, bots, and software scale outward like a living organism. Clients start with one section, then add another and another. The system grows as the business grows. In an era where retailers are obsessed with capital expenditure efficiency, that ability to expand in stages is the difference between a hard yes and a soft maybe. Then there is the software layer, which turns the warehouse into something closer to a living intelligence. Everything is scanned, tracked, and placed according to real data rather than legacy assumptions about where certain goods should sit. Machine learning models make real-time decisions about inventory placement and retrieval, constantly optimizing for demand, seasonality, and urgency. A traditional warehouse uses rows and labels. Symbotic uses a dynamic map that changes shape by the hour. One of the biggest strengths, though, is not technological. It is contractual. Symbotic has relationships with some of the largest retailers in the world. Walmart is the headline name, but it is not the only one. These partners give Symbotic something every tech firm dreams of: dependable, long-term revenue from customers who physically cannot afford downtime. When a retailer commits to this level of automation, it is not a casual experiment. It is a decade-long infrastructure decision. The final strength worth highlighting is perception. In a world anxious about automation replacing jobs, Symbotic dodges some of the political pressure because it operates behind the scenes. Consumers never interact with it. Politicians rarely tour warehouses. That invisibility gives the company breathing room. They can innovate at high speed without attracting the kind of heated backlash that front-facing AI applications sometimes trigger. Taken together, these strengths place Symbotic in a commanding position. A company with real technology, real clients, and a real moat. Exactly the kind of profile that catches the eye of long-horizon investors, and the kind of story that fits neatly into what TechEyeSpy always looks for. A system that rewires the world quietly, efficiently, and decisively. Weaknesses. For all its technological confidence, Symbotic carries weaknesses that come from the very scale of what it is trying to replace. The company is not selling a gadget. It is selling a transformation, and transformations take time, money, and patience. The first and most obvious weakness is the capital cost. Even with modular installation, a full Symbotic deployment can stretch into the tens or even hundreds of millions, depending on the size of the distribution center. Retailers understand the long-term payoff, but the initial expense is still a barrier, especially in a world where interest rates have punished every financing decision. It creates a natural gate that excludes smaller chains and regional wholesalers, leaving Symbotic heavily dependent on giants. That dependence leads straight into the second weakness: customer concentration. Walmart is not just a big client, it is a gravitational field. For years, the relationship shaped Symbotic's identity. Even now, after broader expansion, Walmart remains the client that defines the revenue curve. If Walmart pauses expansion, changes its corporate priorities, or shifts focus to a competing architecture, the impact on Symbotic would be immediate and severe. A company that grows by embedding itself into the infrastructure of another company carries structural risk at every step. Then there is the fragility of complexity. Symbotic's system works because every part of it works. Robots, racks, software, depalletization, repalletization, scanning, routing, and thousands of micro-decisions carried out every minute. When it functions, it is beautiful. When one component fails, it can create a cascading series of delays that are expensive and difficult to fix quickly. Traditional warehouses suffer from inefficiency, but they rarely suffer from systemic downtime. Symbotic replaces inefficiency with dependence. That trade can be frightening for risk-averse operators. Another weakness is the long implementation timeline. These systems do not install overnight. Once a retailer signs the contract, there are months of planning, integration, construction, and calibration. During this period, the client is spending without receiving the full benefit. This lag slows adoption and makes Symbotic's revenue cycles lumpy. When analysts see unpredictability, they start to discount optimism. When investors see long deployment windows, they become cautious. Time itself becomes a friction point. There is also the challenge of perception among warehouse staff. Even if Symbotic avoids the public political battles surrounding automation, the internal environment inside a retailer can still become tense. Warehouse workers understand that Symbotic systems reduce the need for human labor. Management understands it too. The result is resistance. Not enough to stop the rollout, but enough to complicate it. Any technology that reshapes labor dynamics has to confront the human element sooner or later. Finally, Symbotic faces a subtle weakness that comes with being a pioneer. Investors expect perfection. Competitors observe every flaw, every delay, every missed target, and use it to shape their own roadmap. Symbotic is teaching the industry how to automate a warehouse, and every lesson it delivers for free is a lesson a rival will attempt to monetize. Innovation attracts imitation, and imitation slowly erodes the moat. Together, these weaknesses do not derail the Symbotic story, but they do anchor it. They remind us that no matter how advanced the robots become, the business remains tied to capital cycles, human behavior, and the patience of very large customers. It is a company with enormous potential, but also enormous exposure to the realities of scale. Opportunities. When you shift the lens from what Symbotic is today to what it could become, the horizon opens quickly. The first and clearest opportunity is the simple fact that most warehouses on Earth are still manual. They rely on forklifts, clipboards, and human judgment. It is a world held together by experience rather than optimization. For Symbotic, that is not a challenge. It is an undiscovered continent. Every country, every retailer, every wholesaler, and every logistics operator represents a potential conversion. The gap between current warehouse practice and full automation is massive, and Symbotic stands at the edge of that shift with a working, scalable solution. The second opportunity lies in the structural evolution of retail. Online shopping was once a trend. Now it is a baseline expectation. Customers demand availability, fast delivery, and reliable stock accuracy. Retailers cannot meet those expectations with legacy systems designed for slower cycles. Symbotic offers retailers a way to compress time, reduce errors, and survive in a competitive arena ruled by speed. In effect, Symbotic becomes the quiet engine behind a retailer's digital ambition. As e-commerce expands and same-day delivery becomes routine, the need for automation intensifies. Next is international expansion. Symbotic's footprint is heavily North American, but nothing about the technology limits it to one geography. Europe's fragmented retail market, Asia's dense urban supply chains, the Middle East's rapid investment in logistics infrastructure, Latin America's emerging e-commerce growth. Each region is wrestling with the same pressures and the same labor shortages. If Symbotic secures a local partner in even one of these arenas, it unlocks a multiplier effect that could redefine the company's scale. Then there is the opportunity created by the acquisition of Walmart's Robotics division. That move pushes Symbotic into new shapes of logistics, not just massive distribution centers, but e-commerce, micro-fulfillment hubs, dark stores, pickup facilities, and hybrid environments where goods flow in unpredictable patterns. These are faster, more chaotic networks that demand intelligent automation. If Symbotic can prove its system works in smaller, more dynamic spaces, it doubles the potential market overnight. Another opportunity comes from the intersection of AI and supply chain forecasting. Symbotic already uses machine learning to optimize storage and retrieval. The next frontier is predictive logistics. If the system can anticipate demand based on weather, events, seasonality, and consumer behavior, it becomes more than a warehouse solution. It becomes a strategic forecasting tool that could reshape procurement itself. The company that controls the predictive layer will hold extraordinary influence over retailer efficiency. There is also the political and economic pressure to stabilize supply chains. Governments across the world are encouraging domestic manufacturing and distribution resilience after years of disruption. Grants, partnerships, and incentives for automated logistics infrastructure are becoming more common. Symbotic is positioned to benefit from these policies because its technology increases throughput without requiring additional labor that may not exist. Finally, competition presents a strange kind of opportunity. The rise of retail automation has validated the category. Investors now understand the scale and importance of automated warehousing. Instead of drowning Symbotic in noise, this validation makes the company look like the established authority. When customers see dozens of startups making bold claims, they often retreat to the firm that already has a proven record at scale. The more competitors enter this space, the more Symbotic's maturity becomes a selling point. All of these factors suggest a company with room to grow and with a roadmap shaped by global pressures and local needs. Symbotic does not need a dramatic reinvention. It simply needs global logistics to continue evolving in the direction they are already moving. If that happens, the company's opportunity space is not measured in thousands of warehouses, but in entire national supply chains waiting for their next evolutionary step. Threats. Every company transforming a critical layer of the global economy has a shadow side, and Symbotic is no exception. The first threat is simple and structural. Automation is no longer a niche. The moment Symbotic proved that end-to-end robotic warehousing was commercially viable, the rest of the industry began racing to build competing systems. Some rivals will copy openly. Others will chip away at the edges with cheaper, narrower solutions that promise 80% of the benefit at half the cost. New entrants, especially those backed by cloud giants or industrial conglomerates, can compress margins and reframe the value proposition. Symbotic is ahead, but the race behind them is accelerating. Another significant threat is the risk of technological stagnation. A system this complex must evolve constantly. The moment Symbotic stops improving the speed of their bots, the density of their storage grid, or the intelligence of their software, someone else will. Warehousing is an arms race measured in seconds saved and cubic meters recovered. If a competitor finds a way to operate faster, lighter, or cheaper, it can reset customer expectations in a single cycle. Being a pioneer is an advantage until it becomes a burden. There is also the geopolitical threat. Supply chains have become part of national strategy. Governments are increasingly sensitive to the control and data flows that underpin essential goods. A company like Symbotic does not just automate warehouses. It holds a map of what moves, when it moves, and how it moves. That creates political tension. Some nations may prefer domestic solutions. Others may impose regulatory barriers or demand localization requirements that complicate expansion. Geopolitics can turn a global opportunity into a slow, grinding expansion marked by bureaucracy rather than innovation. A more immediate threat lies in labor politics. Even if Symbotic operates behind the scenes, the downstream impact is obvious. Automation in warehouses reduces the need for human labor. Unions, worker organizations, and political groups can pressure retailers to slow or halt automation rollouts, especially in regions with fragile employment bases. One well-timed protest, one legislative intervention, or one regulatory review can disrupt deployment schedules and undermine predictable revenue. Then we reach the threat of operational fragility. Symbotic's system is a symphony. If one robotic node malfunctions, or one software update introduces instability, or one rack alignment drifts by a few millimeters, the system can be compromised. Downtime in a warehouse is not merely inconvenient. It is catastrophic. Goods back up, deliveries are delayed, retailers lose millions. Symbotic lives in an environment where clients expect perfection, and anything less creates financial and reputational damage that spreads quickly. There is also the macroeconomic threat. Warehouse automation is capital intensive. It depends on retailers with strong balance sheets and the confidence to invest in multi-year infrastructure overhauls. When interest rates rise or consumer spending falls, capital projects are the first to be postponed. Symbotic can find itself trapped in a cycle where the demand is clear, but the financing climate suppresses action. The final threat is philosophical. Symbotic is building a world where logistics is automated by intelligence rather than human intuition. That shift brings dependencies. Retailers who adopt these systems become reliant on Symbotic's software, updates, and ongoing maintenance. Any failure in trust, any breach, any incident involving data or security would send shockwaves through the customer base. The same infrastructure that makes Symbotic indispensable also makes the company a single point of failure in a vast supply chain network. These threats do not diminish Symbotic's potential, but they frame it. Automation at this scale is not a gentle evolution. It is a negotiation between speed, safety, politics, capital, and technology. Symbotic stands at the center of that negotiation, powerful but exposed, innovative but surrounded by forces that shift in unpredictable directions. Conclusion: Symbotic is one of those companies that feels almost invisible until the moment you realize how much of the modern world depends on the quiet movement of goods. It does not command attention in the way a social network or a phone manufacturer does, yet it shapes something far more fundamental. It shapes availability. It shapes timelines. It shapes the difference between a functioning supply chain and a fragile one. That is why the company matters, not just to investors, but to anyone who relies on a system that brings food to supermarkets and medicines to pharmacies and the thousand small necessities that define civilization. What we find with Symbotic is a company built on precision, speed, and discipline. It has the intelligence layer, the robotics layer, and the client relationships that anchor a real competitive advantage. It also carries the weight of concentration risk, capital intensity, and the geopolitical pressures that come with automating the engine of retail. This is not a simple story. It is not a hype stock. It is a long-view company that will rise or fall on execution rather than spectacle. For the listener, the takeaway is simple. The next great efficiency gains in the global economy will not come from consumer apps or flashy product launches. They will come from infrastructure. They will come from companies like Symbotic, quietly rebuilding the architecture behind everyday life. This is where the real transformation is happening, whether the headlines notice it or not. If you want to explore the wider forces behind companies like this, remember that TechEyeSpy publishes a full library of technology and investment books through Rhubarb Bridge Publishing. They are available on Amazon and in all good bookshops, and they can take you much deeper into the sectors we touch on here. The podcast is the surface. The books are the deep dive. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, stay curious, and join me again as we continue mapping the companies that are quietly rewriting the world.